Welcome. Before we go for the topic, I would like to, do the introduction for our panelists. We have from extreme left of we have Mr. Matan, who is the CXO and Data Privacy Officer for Vodafone. He's been an industry veteran from his previous team. I'm sure you all know UPI, so he was a CXO for NPCI, and then he was working also for HDFC Bank, and we have Amol, who comes from security community. Yeah, I can hear the whistles from the background. And he's the CISO for An Academy, the next generation moving startups out there. And then I have Varun as a panelist here, who's also a CISO of Bharti Airtel. Welcome to the panel, and thank you for joining me in this discussion. Myself, Avkash, as I already got introduced, I also come from community, and we are going to talk about two main aspects today. One, which is cyber threat intelligence. I know it sounds very cool. We will going to go deep dive and try to open up and see how does it look in reality. And also the parallel which goes with CTI, cyber threat intelligence, what we call is collaboration and the trust aspect of it, right? And to start with, I'll just kick off with the CTI introduction, and then I'll open the floor for some questions. So just to give you an idea on the cyber threat intelligence, right? We all know, for a layman person, right? Threat intel is not a new concept in today's world. It exists since our war days as well, right? We used to have spy, right? Today also in military, we also apply the threat intelligence concept. The same concept is getting transported to the cyberspace, and that is where we are calling cyber threat intelligence. So in a simple language, if you want to understand, let's say I'm taking one example, you have an intel agencies at the country level who are keeping an eye on external threats to the country, internal threats to the country, and they keep curating an intel, and they keep passing on the actionable intelligence to the right agencies. Sometimes it's an LEA, sometimes it's a military, and they act upon it. Same happens in the cyberspace, and that's where the CTI is kicking off as one of the tool. And moving on that direction, first question towards the panel is, again, I'll open this to all three of you, this question, and feel free to ask from your perspective, because you all three bring different experience to the table. So how do you perceive CTI as a tool in your kitty when you are defining the strategy to counter the next generation threats which are out there, which is well known or which may come down the line?
So the context of threat intelligence play a significantly important role for any corporate today. So when we started building, say, defense in depth or a cyber security strategy, it always began with, preferably protect, where your protection breaches at least have the strategy to detect. And in the event something were to happen, have the ability to respond back. Now, if you look at all of these three, these were all completely reactive in nature, right? So you see an event that is happening, you have to have the ability to respond and react back. The predictability part is something that has been missing in the entire corporate cybersecurity strategy. The ability for a corporate to pre-endue an attack that is coming our way was something that was a comprehensive missing pillar in the overall cybersecurity strategy, which is where the predictable part of the cyber came in picture, and corporates started feeling the need to see how will I predict an attack even before it has happened to me, right? So obviously the virtue of intelligence came in purview, and what can and who can be the providers to such intelligence. How do I deeply engrave such intelligence that is coming to me into redefining my protect, detect, and respond strategy became the cursor. And that is where I think the industry development around threat intel and the importance of threat intel to us. Yeah.
You want to add your perspective?
Sure. Yeah. So, for me, threat intelligence, as you said, is a very wide topic, right? We as humans have inherently learned about how to, in the physical world, think about risk and security. I have a 3-year-old, and I see her, once she falls down, the next time she knows not to go there. Not only does she does that for herself, but she has a younger cousin who's 2 years old. And the first time she did that, she went and taught the younger cousin, don't trip over that place, right? Like she held him and walked him around. So to me, in the physical realm, our old brain has just learned to do this day in, day out. Cyber world is relatively new, right? It's 60 years old, and we're still trying to figure out how to communicate this information, how to translate it, how to make use of it. So that's how I simplify it in my head. Matan gave a really good example of the technical intelligence that we're using, but there's also a very strategic element of cyber threat that we have to think about. So I came from the semiconductor world. My previous company was a semiconductor company. And if you know, semiconductor has been in the crosshairs of nation state attacks, right? There's been a war going on for a very long time about how do we manufacture semiconductors, the chips, the designs, and so on. So for us, a huge component of, as we were defining our overall security strategy, was even where do we manufacture these chips, right? We had manufacturing in certain locations, but because of the types of security threats we saw coming from certain areas, we said, nope, we're not going to manufacture there, and so on and so forth. So you have different elements of threat intelligence, as we kind of think about our overall cybersecurity program that we have to take into account.
I hear, both the perspective from the large enterprises perspective. Amol, would you like to take a shot, from a fast-moving agile startup perspective? How do you take CTI as a tool in your strategy?
Since startup, the security is very different, right? So, CTI, we use it as a proactive tool, as Matan mentioned, but it's part of a smaller strategy, right? We can start from the objective of, if something happens, we should know, right? From there, you start, and then that is how you build your security team. Most of the startups don't have the security awareness, so that is why we see a lot of breaches happening. And CTI is one of those tools who can basically, tell you if something has already happened, which can be, first stone of building that security culture and the awareness. So that's how I look at it, the CTI as it.
Thanks. Just to summarize, the responses from all, I think as a strategic tool, right? We all knew, let's say NIST framework, right? People who are doing the cyber risk management, we realize that how we evolved, from prevent, protect to detect to respond. Obviously, we missed somewhere the identify bucket, but still part of the strategy. But how the base pillar of predict is coming out, right? And that's where CTI places itself into the predict bucket. But that's not a bucket which will put into the left side of the framework or the right side of the framework. That's like across. Because when you receive a threat intelligence, right, you need to give it to your preventive technologies, like firewall needs an intelligence, right? Your IPS needs an intelligence, your proxy needs an intelligence. At the same time, your detection technologies like your SIM, UEBA, ANBAD, machine learning driven detection, any type of detection also needs an eyes and ear from a threat intel perspective. Also, the last pillar, response, right? When you're responding, doing a digital forensics, you also need to have threat intel in your hand. And that's how I think I'll summarize the overall discussion, that how it fits into the strategic bucket. And it's an enabler for all the pillars. Now, moving, deep inside the CTI space, right? Today, it's a known understanding that CTI equals to IOC, right? And I'm sure we all have seen the industry evolving, from the days that there was list of one IP which is bad and one URL which is bad, one hash which is bad. The volume, I still remember my SOC days were like 10 IPs, 100 IPs per day we ended up blocking. Today we talk about like million IPs per day, sometimes 2 million indicators per day. How do you see industry, moving in this direction, and how you see the overall indicator of compromise being perceived as a tool within the CTI? Anybody wants to take a shot?
My apologies, going ahead again
No
first.
worries.
So coming from both the experience, say as a telco provider today, and in my previous stint with say a quasi regulator like NPCI, the biggest struggle that we used to face is whenever such threat intel feed comes, stating that block a complete network block. Yeah, and the block could be as simple as block China as a region. I'm just stating country, not offensive to any other state here. But then block a complete territory as a whole. Say for a bank, typically you would have your roaming users still operating from a geography where, say, the nation state may decide to block the complete geography as a whole, right? So the block from a CTI, the context is far more critical for some such actions that were to be taken. So from the days that we operated erstwhile to now, it is like not tens and 20s of IPs. It is a country's pool, the complete corporate pool getting into the blacklist, etc., is coming our way. So the era is moved from standalone looking at IOCs. So the area that we contemplate now is, no matter where the intelligence come from, how does it impact my business today? And what do I isolate that away from the crystal clear blacklist that is coming to me, and not to impact my business, etc., and then move forward, is a position that we rattle today with Akash. Yeah.
Amol, you want to take a shot?
Well, and in startups, I think, the major thing is, move up. Like, there are no blocking stage, right? We operate from small offices. We born in clouds, right? So having gateway level products or, blocking capabilities is going away. I think in like the hashes and the things, right? What you mentioned, we need some protection on endpoints, which can basically, move away from these hashes and things, and probably, detect behavioral patterns or enrich the endpoints protection, so that even if there are certain things, it get protected at the endpoint level.
To me, you described it really well, right? The holy grail of dealing with the complexity of the size that, at least in the telco world, and I'm new to telecom, I'm still kind of learning the environment, but where you have 60,000 servers and you have 120 data centers, the amount of complexity that the teams have to deal with is too enormous, right? So to me, really the goal is, as you described, everyone needs that information. All tools and technologies need that information. Can you truly build a policy engine at the end of the day, which can absorb intelligence from any source, right? Be it a text file, a CSV, or any other sticks or whatever. And then really discern whether it's good intelligence or not. Is it trustworthy or not, right? Because I know there have been cases, even in our company in Airtel, where we've blocked certain IPs that were coming from very trustworthy sources, and it had major customer impact. So you really have to kind of discern whether it's trustworthy intel. Even if it is trustworthy, is it something we should action on or not? And then being able to communicate to these hundreds of, or even in our case, thousands of devices all at the same time. I think that'll be the holy grail. We're not there yet. I'm hoping, Cyber and other companies are investing in it and will get there, but that's what I want to see.
I can't disagree with that, because I still recollect when, this incident popped up. One of the time, right, in the SOC, we got an intel saying that, hey, there's a list of IPs which are like bad, hosting some bad activities, and we ended up blocking on the firewall. Gone, fast forward 6 months, 8 months, we got reached out by business unit saying that, hey, some of my operating systems are not taking an system update, right? And when we investigated, okay, just because some IPs are getting blocked. So 6 months before, the same IPs were hosting a bad malware campaign, got cleaned up and got acquired by one of the operating system providers, started hosting their operating system updates on top of it, and you have the another problem to solve, right? So exactly the point coming out of here is the important aspect is intel comes with an expiry. If you see in physical world also, right, there is, let's say, intel agency identifies there is a bomb threat at 9 a.m. in Goa, right, at Sunday. That will expire after Sunday 9 a.m. Maybe if the attackers are not good, they might delay by 1 hour or 2 hours, but at some point it will expire, right? It has to expire. So it's a characteristics of an intelligence. It has to be actioned on a timely manner. and it will expire. And that's what we see on our day-to-day operational challenges while dealing with the Intel. But one good point, Varun brought up is the trust, right? That's a very important word when we talk about cyber threat intelligence, right? What do we trust? What not do we trust, right? And that is where the second aspect, which I want to, have your view also, Varun, on this is how do you see? We always see the bad guys on the other side of the table are collaborating with each other, right? They are like crafting a malware sample or defining a new CNC way to communicate, right? There's so much collaboration happening on that side of the table, but we don't see much happening on defender side of the table, right? So how do you see building that trust within the community and moving towards the collaboration in CTI space as a longer way?
So look, I wouldn't say that there isn't trust on the defender side, right? This is a perfect example of how we build trust. Look at the community here is just amazing to watch so many people come together. We're doing a live bug bounty program right now with one of our applications. It's just the amount of collaboration that happens, we just don't give enough credit to it. What I will say is there isn't enough reason to collaborate within the corporate world, purely at the corporation level, right? And I think that's a challenge because of how cyber threats get perceived once someone gets attacked. There's a lot of impact on the brand. There could be competition. I'm not saying someone actively goes and impacts someone else, but when it happens, it can almost benefit your competition to a very large extent, right? So the incentives are not exactly aligned just yet. But what we are seeing, at least, Matan and I, we were laughing earlier that, we spend half the time in Sanchar Bhavan in New Delhi. Every time we meet, that's where our meetings happen. The government of India is doing a great job, whether it be the certain, there's a telecom T-cert which is being created. It's almost like an escrow that's being formed, which is acting as a great way to ensure collaboration happens. It may not happen intuitively, today, but I think we're moving in the right direction where it's almost being forced. And I think over time, we'll get better and better at how to share that information in a trusted format.
Would you like to add something on this? Because I think you have been working on this, in your previous experiences on building these communities and bringing people together to collaborate on.
So I think in India, the essence is the move has to get initiated from a top down. We are normally by culture, we would prefer to be disciplined, right? So than being born disciplined, right? So somebody has to tell us this is the right way to do this, culturally, right? So no offense, but so from a state specific, that is where the first direction that began with. We had at least few years back the setup for CERT, which originated, and thereby trustworthy communication in CERT to disseminate information that began. Then that had expanded into the so-called regulators as a community. So you would have domestically here in India, at least we have a very strong regulator in name of for financial institutes, whether it is SEBI or Reserve Bank, and in similar line with, say, a DOT TRI, equivalent for a telecom. So you have structured, regulated, well-regulated industry. So these regulators, next line to the nodal agency like an NCS or CERT, has already taken the first level step to set up such information dissemination. So the quotient is who to trust, right? Who to trust? Can we trust anybody, everybody? The answer is in today's context in security, we are already talking about zero trust, not to trust, right? So when to trust and who to trust, at least there is a nodal standpoint who can be trusted. So there are two different experiences that I have shared. At least nodal agencies in the banking industries have started sharing this intel information as comprehensive exchanges amongst themselves. And I'm sure when financial institutes have set up, it is pure play to do with the relevance of what is happening in financial institute. That goes to the saying, in the current context that we deal with, most of the companies have removed away the verticalization standpoint. So if you look at who is a finance company today. Almost every company who wants to do, has a digital arm, would want to do funding based business, is a finance company today. So the thinning of verticalization will have to expand the footprint for our nodal agencies also to disseminate information to a wider audience group. That should come our way. I think India is still long shot away for that, but there are necessary first steps that have been taken. In my previous experience, we set it up for, the firm that I work, dissemination of information to 1100 member banks. 1100 banks across country here has the ability to subscribe to such disseminated threat intel information. And so on will typically land up happening as industry peers starts forming such information dissemination, Akash. Yeah.
Yeah, Amol, we heard the perspective from more telecom and enterprise perspective, but when it comes to the startup, we always say that the culture is agile and the culture of collaboration, within the company, right? But what are the barriers that you see today, right? When you, let's say, even if you have an intent to do the collaboration, right? What are the challenges that you face today when you want to, even if you want to collaborate or if you want to start your journey, right? What are the problems or challenges that you see or the solutions that you foresee together that we should do?
I think it's the same as what Matan mentioned, right? The trust is always going to be a challenge. I mean, sharing the news, like we still see, if somebody get hacked, right, or breached, we still see from a different point of view. I think that need to be changed. So we need to establish trust amongst the industries. And for startup, it would be really helpful to, come together and discuss who is getting what, right? So that, other peers can benefit and learn from them, right? Most of these, breaches happens with cloud, right? That is why now there is more focus on cloud security. So people can share their learnings, what went wrong, and so that, others can basically learn from it. And before their turn, they can, fix things in. I think that is the need of the time. Somebody need to, build those forum, get those leaders in together. And I think in startup, startup industry specific leaders would make more sense because their world is different than the corporates. Right? So yeah, that's my
yeah. Thanks. I think just to summarize, the discussions that we heard here, I think on the sharing and collaboration, one thing that strike my mind is obviously why the sharing or collaboration. Somewhere the pillar is the context and the relevancy of the intel that comes to my mind, right? That contextual information and the relevancy is most important as a receiving party. Let's say if I am a Goa police, right, and if I receive a bomb threat for Mumbai, that's not relevant for me. Maybe that's more relevant for the Mumbai police, right? So yes, there is a flood of information with all of us, but what is relevant to me? What is contextual to me? That's more important. That's where this sharing and the collaboration will also bring that relevancy into the picture. Think like a big picture. If you have an industry specific collaboration, let's say you have an ISAC, right? Financial services ISAC, space ISAC, aviation ISAC. Those are like industry specific ISAC which exist. They have the members to share an intel with each other, right? At the same time, there are geography specific intel sharing agencies as well as Matan said that at more regulatory level, industry level and geography level also there are efforts which are being put in, but how and when you go and participate into those communities to get more relevancy to yourself, right? So that's very important. Again, characteristics of threat intelligence, when I was just noting down that it has to be timely, it has to be actionable, it will expire, it has to be contextual, it has to be relevant. We see all of these are the characteristics of intelligence, right? And we touched upon one of the aspects of moving towards, more behavioral intelligence, right? So anybody wants to take a shot on, how you see the industry moving from just more technical intel, which is like IOCs, IP domain URL hash, to more behavioral intel, right? Why you see that is important to look just beyond just indicator and why we should go towards behavior. And if you have any idea to share on that aspect, anybody?
Sure, I can go. Look, as you said, right, intelligence when it comes at the tactical level from an indicator of compromise expires very quickly. Most of the threats that we see, again, if you have a nation state attack or an advanced persistent threat, then I would table that for a second, right? Because there's an immense amount of money, there's very different motivations for people, when you have a nation state attack, that they can change their tactics, what they're trying to do very, very quickly, and have, immense amount of funding to be able to do that. But a lot of the threats that occur, which are more financially motivated, the tactics that the threat actors use, they don't change that, right? They might start with the phishing, then they do credential attacks, credential stuffing, so on and so forth. How they do it, what indicators of compromise they use may change, but their overall tactics will not necessarily change, right? That's why understanding the behavior, tracking, a lot of these campaigns become extremely important. Those things take time. And actually, if you can really understand them and have the resources to be able to understand them, can really pay off in a big way for the corporates. Not just corporates, for everyone. I should be careful as I use that word. Yeah.
So one of the aspect that comes to my mind today is the trend shift that has happened in security is there is a lot of gray, right? The decision between a 0 and 1 is relatively easy to make, but then there is way too much of gray area. So if you look at the technology spectrum across security, forget about CTI standalone in picture. In each of these technologies that are there operated in the security domain has drifted away from the 0, 1 to helping us decide in the gray area, the active decision making that has happened, right? So the analytical part, at least over the past 5+ years, we have seen a lot of work happening in the analytics side of almost all the technology. Predictive behavior, whether it is to say user analytics, network analytics, or for even that security events that are happening, has drifted away from the 0, 1 to giving a predictive behavior, which can give, even in risk for that matter, in fraud risk as well. People today don't look at a 0, 1 decision. It is a qualitative analysis that gives there is a 80% probability that the transaction could be a fraudulent. There is nobody who's determining, yes, it is truly a fraudulent or so. So the analytics has deeply engraved into active decision making. And so is what, as a natural progression, I would believe, even in the CTI perspective, as it was earlier, which began with the very crystal clear IOC of blacklist being completely denied, and it has become completely unmanageable these days, Avkash. It is like to the tunes of, if you look at perimeter firewalls of corporate, they would have at least million IPs today. Million will be still a smaller number, which are there in their...
Exhaust the IP before I fear sometime.
Exactly, right? So, and nobody undo these eliminated items. So that should also move to predictive and then in an analytical manner is a natural progression. As and when it happens, we are more than curious to understand how industry takes it up. Yeah.
Amol, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I aligned with both of the
Sure.
options. So the thing is that nowadays, the resources are very cheap for threat actors, right? We have cloud, we have other stuff which make it more resourceful for them. What we need, as mentioned, right, we should move away from the indicative factors than the behavioral factors, where what is the motive of how they are scanning, what they are doing, right? Like these EDR solutions look at the behavior than the hash or the other stuff, which is not fixed, which is like behavioral analysis. So I think that is where it will be helpful.
I think excellent points brought out together. If just to summarize, right? I think the classic example, let's say, I'm sure many of you would have been from red team perspective, right? You might be crafting some of the malwares yourself and testing your organization, capabilities from a defense perspective. Yes, as Amol brought up a point, like resources these days are much cheaper, right? With the help of AWS, GCP, spinning up a new URL or a domain which will host my command and control becomes a little bit easy. So think from an attacker perspective, if I crafted a malware executing one of the technique, and let's say that malware has a hash and that is communicating with one of the domain or URL outside, we call it command and control, right? But just to changing that URL has become like super easy. Changing the hash, I go to the code, write some extra line, hash gets changed. So if I want to attack A organization versus B versus C, I'll keep changing this indicator very frequently, right? So the best way to get behind them is to understand the behavior. Whenever you see such malware or any threat attack happening, we have to go behind the behavior, that what that malware was trying to do, right? Let's say that malware was trying to do credential dumping using PowerShell. So now you know the exact TTP behind that malware behavior. So even if as an attacker, if I changed my IOCs, but if changing the TTP is tough as an attacker. I'm sure there are many techniques available, but crafting that malware, spinning up an infrastructure and then moving on will take some time. It makes my life more difficult as an attacker, right? And that's where a defender has to hit and make sure that while talking about the CTI, we focus on IOC, but we also focus on behavioral aspect as well. So just to summarize overall discussion, I know we have 5 minutes. I want to have the audience for questions, but before I go there, I just want to summarize that we completed the complete life cycle of threat intelligence, right? How you collect the intel from diverse sources, then you analyze what is relevant to you, what is contextual to you. You need to prioritize, because you might receive tens of intelligence today. What is relevant for you, you have to prioritize in the queue. Then also put it to the actioning, right? In the meantime, when actioning has to be across your prevention technology, your detection technology, your response, your risk management, your fraud management. Everybody needs to consume the intel. It's not just your SOC who is going to consume the intel, right? So the complete life cycle of threat intelligence has to be taken care, and I think we covered discussion across the threat intel life cycle. So with that, I would like to open the floor for any question if you have for the panel. We have one from here, one from there.
Hello. Hi. So it was a wonderful session by all of you. My question is, we have the new technologies, threat intel. The idea of threat intel is to safeguard data and infrastructure, and of course have the incident response. Despite that, new technologies, AI, ML, analytics, whatever you spoke about, we still see that the data breaches, the gap is 4 to 6 months, sometimes even to get the data. And even as part of our audits, what we see is in large organizations, although they may have 60,000 servers, 100,000 servers, many of those work in silos. And those threat intels are not covered into critical services per se. Even in smaller organizations, cloud-based organizations, we see that the threat intel is absolutely missing. Because on AWS, they have not subscribed to Elastic services, and AWS or GCP gives us limited visibility per se. And cloud organizations or smaller organizations don't sometimes have those budgets to go into paid services, and etc. So we see that there's still a lot of gap in terms of either silos or budgets, despite the entire technology being available, we don't see many companies adopting those technologies and making this the data breaches or the DOS attacks or whatever is ransomware or whatever, just to reduce those vulnerabilities or reduce those data breaches. So what is your suggestion to the industry and to the community as a whole?
I think that's a complex and tough question. I'm sure anyone of you want to take a shot.
Let me just make sure I understand the question. The question was essentially, hey, we keep buying more technology, but yet the number of breaches keep going up. There's so much threat intel, but how do you effectively operate it?
What is in store for the industry to do to make, to reduce the gap of data breaches from 6 months to maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks with all the new technologies available?
If you have that answer, I'm going to give you $1 million. But no, look,
I have the answer, but I can give you after the session.
Look, this is so the way, at least, I like to think about anything when you do operational effectiveness, right? It's not about technology. Technology is just one layer. When I think of not just me, I mean, any program that you think of, not just cybersecurity for that matter, you think of any technology program, any business program, there are always 4 layers to building a good program, right? There's the people aspect, there's the process, there's the technology, and then you have to govern the whole thing. Even if you don't have one of those pillars working well, your whole program stops working effectively, right? You can buy all the technology in the world, but if you don't have the right people to operate it, it's not going to work effectively. You may have the technology and the people, but you don't have the processes, then you may operate it once well, you may operate it second time well, the third time it's going to fall apart, right? And if you don't have the governance, you may have people, process, technology, but when you have to go upgrade or buy a new technology, if I go to my boss and say, give me another, 2 crores to go buy this, he's going to say, what for? What value did you add, right? So you got to have all 4 layers working effectively. And I don't think any organization can claim that they're doing it 100%. Even if you get to 50% effectiveness, maybe 70%, you'll probably reduce. Exactly. That's a very high number, right? I'm
There's
quoting.
no silver bullet technology that exists.
Exactly. So automation helps. Again, we keep hearing these reports that there are about 2 million jobs globally open for cybersecurity. That's a number no one's validated. Sure, we can say 5 million. I mean, the number keeps expanding every day, right? So who knows what it is? But we got to think about, you just can't have enough people doing the work. You got to think about automation. You got to think about how to make people more productive, so on and so forth. So I guess, as you were saying, there's no silver bullet to this. Yeah. This is a constant battle that we have to keep fighting. But job security, right? It helps.
Thanks for taking that. I think we had one more question from this side.
Hi.
Okay.
So as you said, there are TTPs which defenders and attackers both have pain for attackers to change and for defenders to detect. Okay. So my question, there are 2 questions actually. What actually creates actionable intelligence according to you? Are there any other parameters other than security assessments, risk assessments, SOC? Are there any other parameter which creates actionable intelligence? First, if yes, then what is the actual, a proper way to disseminate them to various organizations or within the organization so that everybody can be helped?
I think that's an excellent question. I'll take a shot if you don't mind. Yeah. So sorry, but that again, that's a characteristic of the threat intel you talk about, right? Actionable. But how do you define whether it is actionable or not, right? And I'll go back to the basics, drawing board. There are 4 types of threat intelligence that we deal every day: strategic, tactical, technical, operational. And action on each of will vary, right? Because technical and tactical, I know it's more that technology will understand. I'll be able to act upon it. I'll be able to tell technology what to do. Hey, block this IP. I can tell firewall, right? Hey, block this signature on EDR. I can defend that technique. So that is doable. When it comes to the strategic and operational, it has to be more human driven. And that's why I say that threat intel has to be covered holistically, and human is an equal important participant when it comes to the digesting, processing and actioning strategic and operational intelligence at the same time. So again, based on the type of intelligence, I would go and try to define the actionable. And again, in each of the category, the actionability of the intel will vary on the quality of intel that you are receiving, right? If somebody is sending, telling you that, hey, there is a bomb threat in Goa, that's not an actionable intel for me. It has to be specific that there is a bomb threat in Goa 9 a.m. Sunday morning, right? I know I need to act upon it. So it has to be very specific, and that's why it will depend on, the source and the quality of the intel that you receive. I hope that answers.
Yeah, thank you. One more.
Oh, sorry. Varun says it's Sunday tomorrow. I do not need to.
I'm really worried. What do you know that we don't?
So only to add additionally is on the common grounds of disseminating such information. At least security as a industry forum used to collaborate way too well those days during the eras of say the firewall and IPS, IDS time. OPSec used to be there. But currently, at least there are way too well-established protocols like Stix Taxi. I'm sure most of you would be aware. So interoperability, dissemination, at least there is a industry-wide adoption of how do we communicate to each other. So That definitely is there.
I think, that's a very excellent point, I think you made interoperability, right?
Yeah.
Because like so many diverse set of technology
Absolutely.
coming in source space, threat intel space, firewall space, interoperability has to come in. And I think that's more a behavior we all have to push, where whether it's all about consuming and threat intel or automating something or orchestrating something, tomorrow you replace the technology.
Correct.
Are you having an interoperable technology, right? Does it support the standards like Stix, Taxi or Kakao, which is being now defined for orchestration, right?
Correct.
That's a very important aspect to look after when, you're looking for any technology.
So if you look at most of the customer requirement today, when we adopt any security technology, is an interoperable parameter, and adoption to say these well-known protocol standards to talk to each other becomes a bare minimum criteria when we adopt technology. Yeah.
I think looking at time, we'll take one last question from this side.
One.
Please, if you don't mind, we'll give chance to somebody else also.
So, yeah, like you guys are discussing about the IOCs and behavioral base. So, like, let me correct first. Like, if I am not wrong, we required both. So, based on the IOCs, we will analyze and identify the behaviors. So, based on that, my question is like, as Sir also mentioned Sir also mentioned that still we are getting the breaches and all. So, and you also talk about the expedition cleaning parts. So my summary of the question is like, we have lots of breaches and lots of IOCs, behavioral base. I am putting behavioral base aside for now. And for IOC, because IOC is the main portion of the behavioral base to analyze. So for false positive, like for threat intel, we are getting many false positive also. And we are not focusing on like cleaning up on that part. Like individually we are doing, like in our corporate, it's one IP, we can clean up. When that organization will come to us, we can clean. So what we can do, like as a, let's suppose one threat intel organization, how we can validate and how we can reduce the database and false positive things in, so like it help.
Maybe wants to take the question more from a false positive reduction and,
I think if I understand the question correctly is, say if there is a TI feed which has given such and such is a blacklisted IP. If that is actually a false positive trigger for you within the company, say a bot trigger has happened internal to a company, but how do you identify or eliminate that being from a black?
No, might be is a true positive at that time, but now it's expired or it is a actual false positive or whatever. So for that, how we can validate and how we can reduce that, so we will get accurate result.
Understand. See, none of these in security, especially, all of these pillars has to go in tandem, right? TA is one of the pillar, like what we talked about, although we didn't touch the identify pillar way too stronger. TA is actually a part of the predict pillar that is coming our way. The predict has given you an insight telling that potentially this could be there is an indicator that I am seeing such and such machine is behaving roguely. Right, so that's an indicator that it is exhibiting behaviors which is potentially equivalent to that of a compromised machine. That is an intelligence for you. The intelligence has to work in tandem with the rest. It could be your response team, which will have to pick up the intelligence to perform analysis. Right, so the analysis might come out telling that it exhibited a behavior, but the behavior is more or less close to my production applications behavior. So I would want to call it into a false positive and take it. So TI don't consider it as a standalone function. It has to work in tandem with the rest of the 4 functions to make it effective.
Yeah, and just I'll add one more thing just to summarize there, right? You said you have to also score your intel. I was just telling that, right? And that scoring cannot be static. It will be dynamic, right? As I said, the IP is bad today, but how much bad? I think Nathan brought up a point that it's not 0 or 1. It's between 0.8, 0.9. But that will also vary based on the situation. Today it's 0.9, you go ahead and block it. But tomorrow it goes 0.2, you have to go and unblock it. But how you define that's 0.8 or 0.2 today, that's a tricky part, and that has many parameters to look into. For example, relevancy, relationship to the ongoing campaigns. There are many, I can go in depth, but there are many parameters which will contribute to the current score of the Intel. That is one aspect of looking at. And also second is there's a concept of internal intelligence. While we focus a lot on external intelligence, what is coming from outside, but you as an organization are also generating yourself many intelligence, because you are also facing so many attacks every day. Your firewall, proxy, EDR, right? So you also end up generating that intel. Are you harnessing it? Are you correlating with the intel which you got from outside? Are you telling at single place that, hey, I received this URL as a bad, but when I investigated, this was false positive. So next time this URL comes, don't treat this as a bad. So that's an internal intelligence also you harness and generate it. It has to marry someplace and give you more, visibility.
In fact, very vital model, even in the cyberspace to look up to is the fraud analytics model. So if you look at fraud analytics, a lot more of intelligence gathering happens from the internal data, what is relevant to me, while the external could actually add value to it, far more to do with internal, right? Yep. So if you look at majority of the threat intel players today, and as customers, when we consume TA also, the relevance from what we see internally plays a far more significant role than standalone what is coming from outside. So we learn a lot from, personally, I learn a lot from looking back into the fraud analytics model, and then leverage similar model back into my TA when we took most of these strategic decisions. So relate back to fraud analytics model is one thing that it's a much more matured model in today's play to relate back.
I think, thanks. I'm getting notifications continuously too. And I know there are many questions. I think we all will be around today, tomorrow. Feel free to, come and discuss offline. But thank you so much for being so much patient and hearing us out. A lot of discussions around cyber threat intelligence. Thank you.